It gives me great pleasure to introduce Greig Roulston. Greig is the Digitisation Advisor at the National Library of New Zealand. So he brings great energy to the place because he loves messing around with library data, building arcade machines, and making video games, which you can actually visit on www.thebattletimes.co.nz. So, without further ado, I'd like to hand it over to Greig.
Hey guys. Wow, so this is maybe the opposite of everything you've seen today, and that stuff's about to get way dumber. So sorry for not all the technical stuff. This might sum it up, but yeah, so I am a Digitisation Advisor at the National Library. I came into this job as a project worker on the McLean Papers project and clawed my way up the ladder through to a photographer, and now as working in the mass digitisation team. So if you're familiar with Papers Past or the appendix to the Journals of the House Representatives online, we're the team that so instead of taking photos of stuff, I now tell people to take photos of stuff. And this is kind of my story of how I learnt Python. And this is the project that got me started. So we have a thing at the National Library called the Publications NZ dataset, and that's part of our catalogue, and that is a list of all published material that was published in or by or about New Zealand. So it covers a range of stuff. Not all of those books. That's not a picture of New Zealand content. Yeah, so the question is this the most complete set? You know, what else is out there? Have we missed something out? And then coming from a digitization angle, what is already available digitally? So many of you might be familiar with Google Books or the Hearty Trust, which I will say wrong repeatedly throughout this. Project Gutenberg, Internet Archive, not to mention people like Victoria University with their Electronic Tech Centre or the Auckland Project, early New Zealand books. People have done stuff all around the world that may or may not be about New Zealand, and I'm trying to pull it all back together so that we can have it in one spot. And so then this question is that there's often been floated for probably as long as I've been at the library, this sort of dream project of, you know, how do we digitize everything? How do we make sure all this stuff is saved in the NDHA for the rest of the time, and so that people can do cool digital humanity things or read old books about geysers or whatever. And as you know, we're a government department. We don't have a massive budget. So, you know, we've got to make sure that we just do the stuff we need to, make it count, no duplication of effort, and all that. So this is kind of the model, I guess, is we have, so Publications NZ, Hearty Trust or Project Gutenberg or a number of other sets. How do I mash it all together and spit out what's digitized, what's not? And that's pretty much it. So what we're talking about here is metadata, and this better fucking work. Yeah, now it's working. So everyone knows there is nothing more metal than metadata. And you know, this is what we're super into here at the library. You know, metadata is awesome. We do it pretty well. We have teams of catalogers who are super passionate about it, to a fault perhaps. But we write crazy metadata. We're real into it. And so maybe to explain some of the concepts a little bit better, I have a bit of a story here. Now, come on. Now this is a story all about how this tech journalist here's life got twisted upside down, and I'd like to take a minute, just sit right there, and I'll tell you how I got mistaken for the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. So, Twitter. It's great, right? We can see what our favorite celebrities like to eat, what they like to take photos of when they're in the mirror, and all that kind of good stuff. So Will Smith, VR enthusiast, maker, Lego builder, was an early adopter. Very early on in the Twitter life, he got his name on Twitter, which is a feat, as some of you might know, because there's millions of Twitterers out there. So this has had some interesting effects on his life. So here we have National Geographic Channel and Telemundo, 2 TV networks in America that are presumably hire professional tweeters who have totally missed and got the wrong Will Smith. So this one's great because it's got a photo of the right Will Smith, but they've tweeted it at the wrong Will Smith. And, you know, I mean, come on, man, you guys are being paid to do this, at least you could do some research. And then you got the guy in the middle there who seems like a bit of an idiot. So, you know, as much as you can imagine, it would be awesome being, hey, people think I'm Will Smith. I'm sure by this point he's getting wicked sick of it. And if you look at his Twitter feed today even, today actually, coincidentally, happens to be the 24th anniversary of the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air starting. So, if you want some comedy, I'm sure if you go to his Twitter feed, you'll see a bit of it. So this is, sums up why I think this is a good example to explain to non-library people about it. So people have made incorrect assumptions with the data at hand, which is something I do a lot of in this project. With the right metadata, the problem becomes easier to solve, and shock horror, books like people often have the same name, title, publication date, whatever. So that's why I've taken you on this weird little Will Smith tangent and got Bel-Air stuck in your head for the rest of the day. I've had it for months. Yeah. Anyway, so this is the beginning. This is how Greig learned Python. Well, kind of learned Python. I'm feeling a bit overwhelmed, to be honest, so far. I have no idea what any of you guys are talking about. But, so anyway, I started off, as I said, I think I forgot to mention, I have a graphic design degree in animation. So if you had said to me 10 years ago, you will be 1, writing programmy stuff, or 2, talking at a PyCon conference, I would have probably laughed and told you you're crazy. But, you know, so I had this, I've always been interested in hacking around with game engines, Unity and Game Maker and all that kind of stuff. You know, so I taught myself a bit of JavaScript in the past, write a mean DOS command, and use Excel to do some weird and wonderful things with those DOS commands that people think I'm crazy for doing, but that was how I did things before Python. So this all started with this work a consultant did for us where he scoped out the bibliography. So this happened, I think it was about 3 years ago, and as far as I can tell was one of those, we need to spend some money by the end of the financial year, why don't we get this guy to do this thing? And I don't know if that's actually how it happened, that's just how I assume it happened, because that's how we roll in the digitisation team. So what he gave us this report with sort of some counting numbers, you know, all that kind of business, but he gave us this ridiculously large Excel file. It was like 300 megs. No one could open it, because we only have Excel 2007 in the library, still to this day. Yeah. So I put my hand up, I'm like, hey, I have a laptop at home, I have a newer version of Excel, I'll have a crack at that, you know, because I'm eager to please, happy to help and all that kind of stuff. So I, you know, put my hand up, said, yep, I'll do that. And I went through the data and I was like, well, I feel like this guy's made a lot of really bad assumptions about library data. For one, we had these reports on, you know, what are all the books that got done before that would, in scope and sort of low-hanging copyright fruit, that could be done from pre-1920. Now, he had grouped into that thing all the stuff that didn't have a date. Now, that's a lot of content in our catalog because sometimes these records are just not complete. And so that was like, that really bugged me. So I was like, you know what, I'm sure I can do a better job of this. So, and then I had this crazy idea. What if I matched the Pubs NZ data set with the Happy, however you say it, data set, you know, then I'd be a legend, right? I've like, you know, our digitisation numbers would jump, we've matched all this stuff, we've given content to New Zealanders that, you know, we would normally have to pay for, but we've done it for free because all we had to do was ask for copies. It would have been awesome. So that's kind of where I started with this stuff. You know, we'd be doubling our stuff overnight, it would be amazing, it would be epic. But I'm going to take you on another little story here. And this is one you may be familiar with. Cecilia Jimenez. She also had good intentions. She also didn't have the right tools for the job, any business doing this, or any artistic experience. How hard could it be? This is how hard it could be. She ruined a 180-year-old fresco by fixing it up and restoring it. Now, this might be shocking, she's ruined this, I don't even know what period of painting it is, whatever. She's ruined this fresco in this church. Apparently, depending who you talk to, with or without the permission from the priest. But here's the weird thing that's come out of this. This went viral, and now that church is getting more people going through it than ever to see this monstrosity. So, not all these things, it's not all bad news, right? Like, sometimes good things come from bad things. But again, sort of sums up my experience with this stuff. So this is basically what happened when I tried to do this matching task. No matter how hard I VLOOKed up or did anything like that, Excel just was not a happy camper. It does not handle 420,000 records. It definitely doesn't handle 8 gigs of happy trust data. So, I said to my good buddy Jay, how would you do it? And he said, something Python. I don't remember, don't want to misquote him, but that's what he said, and that was where it started. So, Jay on a horse, that's an inside joke. I don't even remember where it came from. What runs away, I started my trip with Python, which I really enjoyed, but I don't know if you know this, but if you don't know anything about programming, it's hard when you first start. So I was writing scripts that needed other scripts to work out the results. I was dumping things to sweet text files. It was hard work. It was, trying to learn the madness that is regex. I don't know who came up with that, but this thing helps learn regex. So this is my first pro tip of the talk. If you're not familiar with regex, use this. I don't know, you probably are. You guys all seem pretty smart. But you can paste your stuff in there, look up the regex mask things, type them in, it'll highlight it. It saves you waiting 3 hours to realize that you made your mask wrong, like I did many times. So yeah, that's awesome. So then, going through my data, I realized, hey, I need more data. So this consultant had stripped out half the title from the thing. So it was a rough set of data. He had made it for a particular purpose. I had bastardized it, stole it, tried to do something else with it. It was not working out well. I was banging my head against it. So, it was time to, bring out the library big guns. It was time to tackle MARC. So I don't know if any of you are familiar with MARC, but MARC is awful. It was designed based on these things, which are card catalogs, and it was developed in the 60s. It was an international standard by, I think, 72, and it looks like this. I don't even know what their madness is, those square box things. I don't know, anyway, it's crazy. And it looks like this when you look at it in a more sane version on our website. So you can see all those little A's and B's and V's and stuff. They all mean stuff, I don't know what they mean. Catalogs tell me things sometimes. Yeah, anyway, it's kind of crazy, and it needs the Library of Congress guidelines on MARC are super long and super detailed and super hard, but I've become somewhat of an expert in terms of hacking around with this stuff. I use a module developed by Ed Summers from Library of Congress called PyMarc to make sense of it, so I actually don't need to deal with that madness. But it's overwhelming. So I was starting to think, oh man, I have too much data. I don't know what to do with it. I have, is it important to know what the weird 05 thing in the leader field means, or is it important to keep the data that tells me how many this or that, or, there's a lot of stuff in there, and it's different if you're dealing with maps versus books versus serials. All the MARC fields are slightly different. Some of the main ones are the same, but it's crazy. So then last year, around Christmas time, I got this sweet present from OCLC. So OCLC is the world library, basically. They do our interloan system, and they harvest our records and mash them together and say, hey, if you go to the website, you'll know that there's a copy of this book in Palmerston North or at Massey or wherever, and it'll tell you how many kilometers. It's kind of awesome. So this guy, Lorcam Dempsey, came to talk to us last year sometime, came to Lianza, which is the library conference, and he had this sweet visualization stuff saying this is how much New Zealand content is in OCLC. So I was like, oh, this is perfect. He's just done my job for me. I can leverage that. So this is what he gave us. He gave us these 3 lists, plus their counterparts on stuff that was in the Hathi Trust. And it was way higher than our pubznz data set, right? Like it's almost twice as big by the time you munge it all together. And we were like, well, okay, cool. That's, our set's obviously rubbish because, well, not rubbish, sorry, it's not accurate. And then so I munged it together. Looking at this the other day, this is my first graph from MatPlotLib. So, yeah. I don't actually think it's accurate though. So I think I put in some wrong numbers. So, yeah, but hey, my first attempt. So what I did is I mashed all that stuff together into a JSON file because JSON is awesome. It's easy to read. It's like a dictionary in Python, so you don't have to do weird converty things. Loving it. And that brings my next pro tip, JSON. If you're gonna make JSON, get yourself one of these little viewer thingamies where you can do arrows and close things and expand them and stuff. Makes it easier to read. It's good times. I like JSON. So then, so what I did with that stuff is I made this crazy long JSON file, merged them all together. I was like pretty happy with myself. And I said to Jay again, Jay, I've started building this Flask app where I can view my data, I can arrange it, but I want to be able to add to it. I want to be able to search it. I want to be able to do all these things. And what he said to me was, you are literally just described a database. So, being that I don't know anything about these things, I was like, you know what? That sounds better than using a JSON file, and I was going to save it to Dropbox, had this crazy plan. It was ridiculous. But, Jay added some sanity. He pointed me in the right direction, and I started to, come on, Jay, zoom away. There we go. So what I ended up coming up with was MongoDB. Because one, the manual is like a leaflet, whereas the MySQL book that I had on my desk from the previous guy that sat there was like a tome. And it uses JSON, so it was like my perfect database. And that's one of the advantages of being like a late adopter or not being trained in any of this, is that you can pick the option that works for you rather than the option that the internet says is awesome. So yeah. So I've done that, I've got my stuff in my MongoDB, I start like looking at it and stuff, and what I discover is that this is the material that is in the New Zealand material that OCLC identified in the Harthy Trust. So 86% of it, closed access, and that's a lot, right? And there's about 10,000 items in there. Only 6% are open in New Zealand, 7.9 if you're in America, because American copyright's awesome. But so the cool thing about this though is despite the fact that it's all closed, that gives us, the digitisation team, something to shoot for that we can negotiate with government publishers, New Zealand publishers, and try and open up access to that stuff so that we can then get copies of it to the NDHA, which is the National Digital Heritage Archive, that's our digital preservation system. And it gives us a target. It's awesome, And then I was like, why is this data set so big? And guess what? There's a lot of movies in there. So I used to manage a video store, so I'm reasonably familiar with the title. So what I did is I printed out, or maybe I made a Flask page, I don't remember, whatever, it doesn't matter, of the top 100 most held records in this data set. And what I found was 40 of those were movies. So Robin Hood, because of Russell Crowe, was listed as a New Zealand item. So then I kind of started talking to the people that gave us the data and found out the way they made their list was they scraped Wikipedia, found all the New Zealand people, and then just chucked them into this list. So if you're familiar with 2.5 Men, that weird neighbor girl, Rose, I think her name is, she's a New Zealander. Therefore, by OCLC's definition, 2.5 Men is New Zealand content. So, not great, but so again, I've come to this point where I'm like, man, I still don't have the right data. I've been trying to munge it, I've tried taking shortcuts, I've tried using other people's data sets, all in the hope to avoid using MARC, because MARC makes me blue. MARC is hard, but you know what, that's the thing, is that I'm gonna have to go back to the MARC. It is the authoritative source of New Zealand content made by the National Library. I should have more respect for it, and I should use it. So, journeys. That's where I'm at with my project. I got the computer blues, don't know what I'm doing, haven't touched it for a while. It's time to reflect on what I've learned, and sort of plan the next steps. So, things I've learned. the more things you have, the harder everything is. That might be no surprise to any data sciencey people, but it was a surprise to me. I thought programming with Python-y stuff would make this super easy. It just took ages. I mean, I had a script at one point that was going to take 3 months to run, and I don't even know if it was going to give me the right answers. At a guess, looking back, it wasn't. So, you know, and that would just depend on how many times my sweet Windows laptop decided to update itself and reset it, so who knows how long it would have taken. So yeah, the more things you have, but you got to be prepared, you got to know your stuff, because if not, something like this is probably going to happen. You're going to put your keyboard through your screen, you're going to stab your monitor on a stick. Don't know what you're going to do, but it's not going to be happy. You're not going to be happy, no one's going to be happy. Which takes me to my next kind of learning, that when you get this new data set, you kind of need to understand it. You can't just make assumptions and be like, it's fine, because you need to test those assumptions, and you need to know what you're doing. So that means maybe you should take your data out to dinner. Maybe you should ask it those first awkward first date questions, like what do you do? What is your purpose? You should know your data. You should get intimate with your data. You should try new things. Before you go too far, you should talk to the people who wrote the data, perhaps, and as much as the documentation is scary, you should probably read it. And then, you know, maybe find out what it's into. Don't be the guy that casually suggests, hey, let's strip out all the square brackets from the MARC data, because if you do that, the catalogers will cut you. Because square brackets quite important to MARC. That means the cataloger has had to make a guess or make something up. It isn't actually written on the book. So I actually did that. They didn't cut me, but. So then, yeah, once you get to know your data, you can be like, yeah, let's party, new data, awesome. And that takes me to my next point in the journey. So the biggest thing that I've found useful, other than having Jay sitting next to me, is going to hackathons, or if you're risk-averse, code jams. So you should probably grab your leather jacket, put on your baddest sunglasses, strap on those rollerblades, and head to a code jam hackathon. So we had this one called Heritage Reserve in June, and it was awesome. Everyone was going on about Elasticsearch. Still don't really know what it is, but I hear it's awesome, and everyone was doing it. So that's formed the next part of my plan is, you know, I've got my data sets. I'll probably do something with Elasticsearch to match them. I don't know, this guy Chris from Catalyst said he did something with it in like 7 minutes, which blew my mind. So that sounds good. Then I don't know if I need to, but if I do, I'll probably save it to MongoDB because I like it. And then I'll build a sweet Flask app to explore my data, get to know it even better, take it out to dinner and all that. And skipping ahead, sorry. So that leads me to this point here. So we loved having the code jam at the National Library, the Heritage Reserve thing. This guy here, Jay, who's not on a horse anymore, but he helped organize it. And I kind of want to troll our web guy and at the same time build some momentum for the next one. So if you do like the sound of playing with library data, I want you to tweet at NLNZ, we want jam. Now, messages are optional. It would be kind of awesome if it was just a whole lot of tweets saying we want jam, because it'll probably, I'm not at work till Wednesday, so you know it's a few times for him to go, what the hell is going on? Or you can find Jay and ask him about it. He doesn't have the jar or the horse with him, so it might be a bit harder to spot. There you go, horse. So yeah, that's me. That's my talk. Thanks for listening. Does anyone have any questions? No one has questions.
Oh, someone was just stretching. What? Made me run all this way. Oh, Jesus.
That's cool. We can go to lunch early. That's cool. I'm happy.
Yes.
This one. All right, okay, so we're real big onto like collaboratively digitizing things at the moment. So the idea is that we make this master list where we'll grab all our different digitized stuff, match it against the catalog, and then we can say to people, hey, we've got this digitization project that's like, I don't know, let's say it's like 250,000 books. And then either we will try and get the funding to hack through it ourselves, or we will try and partner with other people who have a similar interest to try and do it. Or maybe make a, say, like, I'm not promising this, but maybe we'd make like say for example, a website or something where people could assign, hey, I'm going to digitize this book, be it at a personal level or at an institution level or something like that, you know, that kind of thing. So it's about not duplicating the effort, about being smart with it, and yeah, just basically bringing it all together, because so one of the big problems I've had is that, so the OCLC numbers that the World Catalog people supply, I assumed that they would map one book to one OCLC number. Turns out there's about 10 OCLC numbers for one book, because they never, when they matched all this stuff, they did it in a very risk-averse fashion, so you have a shit ton of duplication. Yeah.
I wasn't 100% sure that I understood this correctly, but are you doing the coding you are doing on Windows?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So this isn't really a question, it's just perhaps a little something to put in your journey plan. Because I've had a number of friends who are completely untechnical but have certain things that they want to get done. And what I've ended up doing with them is giving them a virtual machine that they run inside their Windows. And then generally a headless Ubuntu. And although there's a little bit of a learning curve there, there's so much pleasure once you get going that I can't tell you. You know, it's easy to bag Windows, and I'm not really setting out just to bag Windows. But for big I'm just suggesting you might like to try that. And if I'd be happy to help if that was.
Yeah, no, I actually all my 3 of my computers at home are actually running Ubuntu at the moment. But it's the problem that I'm, with the graphic design, animation-y stuff that I do, I need Windows to be able to run Adobe Creative Cloud. So it's either this or a Mac, and work wouldn't buy me a Mac.
Right.
And I don't have $5,000 or whatever it is to get the MacBook Pro of a similar spec. Yeah.
All right, everyone, put your hands together for Greig.
Oh, very long.